Hello, everybody. Seth here from Tourmaline Spring, and I'm with my business partner and one of my nearest and dearest friends, Bryan Pullen. We've known each other for over a decade now, and it's funny because through the history of Tourmaline Spring and Summit Spring and everything that's happened, Bryan and I have kind of been pegged as the odd couple because the way people would perceive me is like the left-wing liberal hippie, even though I'm a political atheist. But still, people would judge me or perceive me as being that, whereas Bryan would be more on the right wing conservative type of angle, political angle, and people would always be like, "What do you, how are you guys friends? Like, what's the common denominating factor here? What ties you guys in together?" And it's interesting because so many things tie us in together. Even though we may have different perspectives on certain angles, like everybody does, Bryan and I share such an affinity, obviously for water, but for so many other things in life around nature and just around being, that it has allowed us to persevere through our friendship, through the ups and downs, through the trials. And believe me, we have been through some serious trials with the whole raw water trend, with all the things that have happened. Our friendship was almost put on the line. Like, we've been through it all. And here we are today. We're still close friends. We're still working together, and we still operate the absolute highest quality, most integral water bottling operation in the world, as far as we know, for a million different reasons, which you're going to hear us list and get into throughout this series of podcasts and interviews. We're going to cover everything that we've always wanted to talk about. Bryan and I have been in front of every major mainstream media outlet you can think of, every one of them. And we've wanted to say so much. And in fact, there were times when we did say what we wanted to say and they took it out. So this is Bryan and I. This is Tourmaline Spring. This is Summit Spring. This is uncut, uncensored, and completely raw, just like this incredible water that we drink. So I want to introduce my friend Bryan Pullen, and I think from here I'd like to let's just get into the history of how you came to be the owner of Summit Spring, the history of it. Let's start there and get into that.
The steward.
The steward. That's such an important concept. That alone.
The steward, right? It has a. I'm going to be long gone here before too long, right? We all will. I'm the fifth steward in the 235-year recorded history, best we can tell, which in itself is quite amazing.
Explain to people what that means. A steward of, because most people have no idea what stewardship even means. But to be the steward of a source of water like this is something that people don't hear about. It's an unknown thing.
It's more. It goes back to a lot of Native American philosophies. I think it's more a protector. People said they've seen me as the protector of the spring, and it's my job, or it's been my chosen passion to take care, preserve, and resurrect this brand, which has a lot of meaning in and of itself, right? Resurrection, and that's probably the main reason that I was able to purchase this from the woman, is because of my desire to resurrect the brand and to respect its history, which nobody else wanted to do.
And nobody else, you mean other companies and corporations and
other buyers they wanted to buy the site and then fill tankers with the water and send it down the road and get paid.
Probably drill into it and ruin the spring just to get more water.
I'm the only one that ever came forward over the years that appreciated its history and wanted to restore its namesake and all that. So I take it all very seriously, the protection. Long after you and I are gone, my family, your family, this is generational, right? This goes on for a long, long time. You see a lot of the stewards in the past had this spring most of their life until they fell ill or died, Franklin Van Zelm, and then his wife lived there for many, many years after that. So it's, you think about a 235-year history, 5 people is not very many. This was never in my family. So this is something I came upon on my own. I spent most of my growing up from a teenage years in Raymond, Maine, down by Sebago Lake. And then it just got too crowded for me. I used to ride my motorcycle out everywhere I could to get away in the wilderness a little bit more. And I just found this area out here around Summit Hill in Harrison. It was like kind of like the land that time forgot. And I drove into a realty office and I said, I'd like to buy 100 acres or more out here, you know. And she said, it's funny you should mention that. There's a piece of land we had for sale. It's not on the market anymore, but it sounds like what you want. Let me see if it's still available. Called the owner. It was. Long story short, I ended up buying it. And as soon as I came here and started to prepare the land and improve the road, the neighbors said, you know what used to be down the road was a very famous 55-room hotel. I was incredulous that in the wilderness here, you know, that why would there be a 55-room hotel here? They said, well, there's a famous source of water. Now, I'd been interested in water for about almost 35 years now. At the time, probably 15 years, because I'm a commercial pilot by trade. The first time I ever flew out of the state of Maine and went somewhere else, I noticed right away that the quality of the water was terrible and had trouble drinking it, actually. So early in my career, one of the first things I noticed was the quality of water other places, New York, New Jersey, terrible. I started bringing my own water from Maine as I was flying, and I always was interested in water, studied water. And when somebody said there was a famous natural spring down the street, of course, that piqued my interest, and went to the local historical society, and they had ample records about Summit Spring, one of the oldest sources in North America, as it turns out. You know, 235-year history. There's records, just accurate historic records that date to 1792, which predates the town of Harrison and predates the state of Maine. It was actually Massachusetts back then, so part of the original colonies. So the history is incredible here. You know, in the 1800s, it was taken by horse-drawn carriage in 35-gallon wooden barrels and put on the narrow gauge railway in Norway, Maine, shipped to New York City, where it sold for 40 cents a gallon in 1881. Which is over $100 a gallon today. So quite amazing history. I actually bought the land here in 1994. I approached the woman that owned the spring at the time and wanted to help or be involved or even possibly try to purchase it. And she was not interested at the time. And I was not able to actually purchase the spring until a decade later in 2004. When she was considering selling it to a large corporation, which we won't name.
Yeah.
But everybody can guess.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, she was taken aback by my desire to resurrect the brand and the history. I had studied the history, knew all the history. She was so impressed with that. She decided not to sell to them and to sell to me. And actually, to her credit, carried the note for me for 25 years, which I still am paying on. So if she had not done that, I could never have afforded what it was. It was a substantial amount of money.
Let's talk about that in the sense, like, because people don't realize, they see the brand Tourmaline Spring. I have so many people who think we're the biggest company. You know, they're like, oh, they're one of those giants. They're huge. It's everywhere. And what they don't realize is that there's basically three of us doing this. There's Bryan, the owner. There's Ray running the bottling facility. And there's me marketing it. That's it. That's the company essentially right now.
And bottling often.
Yeah, he does. Right. And we all come up and do that together at times. So people don't realize that this isn't a big company. This is a really, really small company. And Bryan has owned Summit Spring for what, 15 years?
Over 15 years now.
In 15 years.
Never turned a profit.
Never turned a profit. And we've kept, I mean, I've had people be like, oh, you guys are rich. And this has been a passion play the entire time. And to the degree where we've all been like, what are we doing? You know, sometimes we're like, if we wanted to survive and do other things, like there's so many other things we could do, but we keep being drawn back to this love of water that we have, which really reflects in not just the brand, the way, but what it really reflects in is the way Bryan built the bottling facility. Because just the way the facility itself is structured is something that people don't hear of. They can't even, when you explain it to them, they don't even get it, because there's no other models like this. But the model speaks to an old-fashioned level of integrity that relates to stewardship, that relates to permaculture, that relates to working with the land as it is, to only be able to, I don't even want to use the word take, but to only capture what Mother Nature
Don't take
offers.
anything.
Yes, we don't take anything. So the entire structure of the bottling facility was built with these principles in mind. Talk about that. Talk about what made you want to do that, and what it does. Let's talk about what it does. Yeah.
Say again?
I said, let's talk about how the facility works and then why you did it.
When I was studying the historic photographs, I noticed in only a couple, there are precious few pictures of the barreling building. Almost non-existent. There's only one or two photos, and there's an artist depiction of the spring and where the water emanated from the side of the building, or actually before there was even a building. It was just an open granite block area, and you could see where the barreling building was lower, and it just became obvious to me that they were filling these barrels by gravity somehow. They were just letting the water flow into the barrel because of the slope of the land and the high altitude nature of the spring. I'm like, it became obvious to me this would be the perfect situation to not impede on the water, not to suck out of the ground, or we don't need any of that. You just kind of redirect it gently where you want it to go and straight into the bottle. So by the time I bought it, the barreling building is long gone and burned down or fell down, or it wasn't there, but I could see where it was. So I just made the decision to excavate right where the barreling building was. In fact, if you look at modern photos of the spring house now, you'll see a series of granite blocks in front of the spring house. I put those there. They are actually the foundation blocks I found underground of the barreling building itself. So they have a lot of historic significance. So I kind of made a wall in front of the spring house to protect it with those, and then rebuilt a small building there. And then we redirected the water. It used to flow right outside and down the hill. We redirected the water in stainless steel pipe into the building itself, all by gravity. And so it just became obvious to me, when you start looking at machinery, there are old-fashioned machines. Like we work with Filler Specialties, and I think they're in Michigan or Wisconsin. Great old family business. I met the owner. He's like the fifth generation owner, and they use a style of machine that's a gravity-fed machine with a big bowl above it, where the bottles are just pushed up and release the water into the bottle, all with no pumps. And I just love that's an old 1700s, 1800s technology. A couple big wheels underneath, and that's a little motor, and that's all it is. Nothing's pumped. So I said, what a perfect situation to do this like they did in the old days, you know? It's like the old Jackson Browne song. It's like father and son. It's the way it's been done since the old days, you know? And there's a lot of tradition in Maine. And I said, what a perfect way to try to recreate what they did, is capture this water with no human or mechanical interference in the water. And early on, when I first started, the state regulators and other people that have been in this business told me I had to treat it and I had to do all these things, and this is how it's done. I didn't know any better. I just followed everybody's direction, but it started to become apparent to me. And what really started this impetus was meeting you and Daniel, talking about this in the beginning and wanting an untreated water for your clientele, right? For the naturopathic. And
that's Daniel Vitalis, by the way, for anybody who's listening. He's a close friend of ours. We've known him forever. But Daniel and I had a passion for water, obviously, like devout passion for all things related to spring water, just everything to do with water, but really in the vein of Victor Schauberger and this possibility of living water. Anybody who I had a friend in Canada, Peter the Gnome and Raven, they had this whole living water thing going on. David Wolf, who many people know, was a friend of ours, and we were all really into this. And Bryan reached out to me and Daniel and said, "You guys got to come up here and see this because it's everything that you're talking about." And look, all the springs that Daniel and I had seen, we traveled around the world, hot springs, cold springs, warm springs, salt springs, just everything, everywhere. We're just right into water. Me personally, and living in the state of Maine my whole life, I had never seen a spring like this in my life. It's almost like a stratovolcano. The typical idea of what a stratovolcano is, where, there's that cone shape and then the middle is lava. It's not unsimilar. It's not dissimilar to that in that, but it's not water. It's not magma or lava. It's water coming up, a lot of water. So old, ancient water.
And cold
water. Exactly. Really cold water. So to see this massive amount of water coming up this high above sea level, literally like way up above sea level, it just did something to me. I was just like, it's like going to church, or it's like having a spiritual experience. It's like it invokes all of these things or going to a sacred site. You have this feeling where you're like, wow, I'm somewhere special. Hence sacred living water. Hence this idea of stewardship, of protecting something, because there's something of value that is beyond words. So not to go into a whole segue here, but I just wanted to say that about Daniel and
I had sampled the water out of the spring myself, many, many times. I would drink it right out of the ground. It was just phenomenal. And I had done a couple small venues, untreated like that, for a couple chamber of events, chamber of commerce events, but never really thought about doing it untreated on a large scale. When you guys pushed me on, can we do this, commercially, I said, well, we're going to need regulatory approval to do such a thing. That's really, out there to do this on a large scale. But I said, let's try, because the water is phenomenal. And the regulatory person that was in charge of me for many, many years, Scott Whitney, I said, Scott, why can't I bottle this water straight out of the ground, sell it to the public? It was like, it's like asking to borrow your car keys from your parents when you're 14 years old. It just, you know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's no way. Nobody does that. Everybody treats the water. Yeah, okay. I know my parents walked 50 miles uphill both directions to school, but now we have cars, right? Why are we doing this kind of thing, right? So explain to me why, and I had the chemical analysis, had the testing. There's just no reason. The water was perfect out of the ground. And to their credit, after a little bit of prodding and explanations and chemical analysis and reassurances from the testing agencies, they did acquiesce. To their credit. My hands off to the regulatory bodies in Maine. They're fantastic, thinking outside the box. The drinking water program and the Department of Agriculture are codependent or co-oversight of bottled water. It's the only state in the nation that has two agencies oversee it.
That's a big deal. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Listen again, people. The state of Maine has two governing bodies that oversee drinking water. Every other state has one or none. Yeah. So they take their water very seriously up here.
After we talked about it more, I have a letter of approval for what we called raw water initially, right? Because that's the scientific definition of untreated water from a source is raw water. So we actually got the trademark and started bottling raw water and without treatment. So we really pioneered the concept of untreated spring water in the United States. We know of nobody else that's ever done this on any type of scale. So we had the blessing of the state, and believe it or not, federal guidelines do not require water to be treated when it crosses state lines. It only requires it to be potable. So the federal rules did not impede us either. So we were legally allowed to bottle water straight from the ground into the bottle without touching anything. And that's how raw water was born.
What year? How long ago was that? Was it
Oh, it was 09,
Oh
2000,
nine.
over 10 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Time keeps flying by. But yeah,
And
we'll post photos of that and go
keep
ahead.
in mind the state of Maine. I One of the things that was important when I wanted to do this, I asked the regulator how many complaints they have on file about Summit Spring water in its entire 150-year plus recorded history with the regulatory agencies, which many of that was probably untreated back in the day, right? They didn't have treatment back then. So that water was untreated in the barrels and everything else.
Mm.
So I said, how many complaints do you have on file? And he goes, well, I checked right before I came here to see what kind. There are zero. Zero. I was astonished. Zero complaints in a century and a half. I mean, if that doesn't explain everything you need to know, and that in large part gave them the comfort to do what we did, because there was a backlash in the media, and people were writing in to the head of the drinking water program saying, how can you allow this to happen? The ground is dirty, and you can't, why you're supposed to protect us and all this nonsense. And the head of the drinking water program in the papers, and I said, look, people, that water exceeds every state and federal guideline for drinking water straight from the ground. The ground is not dirty. Deep underground, things are incredibly pure. So it's quite people just have misconceptions about the earth, and it's an education process for everybody.
And they don't realize it's like the same filters that people use on their tap water or their Brita filters. These are made of earth elements. So what even the best whole house filtration systems and all their carbon elements and everything that they're made with pale in comparison to the natural filtration system that the earth has installed in the case of this spring. It's I mean, when you we talk about this, it's incomprehensible actually to think about what could be happening with this water underground and the many layers. It's funny because I see all these different water filters and they're like, oh, it goes through all these different stages and different types of things. And it's like the amount of stages that this particular water goes through in order to bubble out of the ground as this perfect drinking elixir is incomprehensible. And it spans over millennia, thousands of years. We had a water chemist come up here, John Dyer, an amazing guy, owned a laboratory for 40 years. This guy knows water chemistry inside and out. He said that this water is at least 10,000 years old, meaning that it had been underground for 10,000 years. This is his perspective, if not forever. It may have originated under the ground almost entirely, which that's another thing we can get into later, more hypothesis and speculation as to the source. But the point is, the amount of filtration that this water goes through, just what we know is mind-blowing. What we know is that it's coming from deep, deep underground. It's being pushed against gravity up through the earth. So all the particulate matter, anything that's heavy in it, just naturally falls away. But then it's coming up through bedrock. It's coming up through sand, through silt, through all these different layers of earth, which further refine the water. Okay, then there's a bunch of quote unquote shadow elements that we don't even know about, which is why, I rebranded the raw water as Tourmaline Spring. We rebranded it as Tourmaline Spring because I wanted to tell the geologic history of the entire area, which the granite bodies that this water is coming through are so complex. There's so much mineralogy, gemstones. I mean, it's mind-boggling, which we'll get into this in a whole other episode of this. But the effect that all these different minerals are having on this water are something that nobody even really knows about. It's certainly having some kind of an ionization effect on it, but we don't know what it's doing. And it's funny because a lot of people would think, oh, it's one of the most mineralized granite bodies in the world. You'd think the water would just be full of minerals. Would it?
Very low mineral, very low mineral. I mean, what I have a hard
Exceptionally
time
low.
fathoming is that when that water emanates at the surface and we scoop it out, you're now exposing yourself to something that has never seen the impact of humankind. It's been there since before we were here. So you think about how much man has polluted the earth and our impact on earth. What other thing on this planet can you find that has had no impact from man? This water has been trapped underground in nature's vault for, like you said, millennia. Nobody really knows. And to be able to drink of it's the holy grail, right? It's to drink from a source of water, which is, we're water creatures. It's the most important thing, right, in our lives, right? Your blood's 93% water, you know. To be able to put this pure water into your body, that's this gift from nature that has nothing in it. I mean, people that drink tap water or the versions of tap water, which all the major brands are all versions of like twice baked potatoes, right? It's not one can of Febreze, it's 5 cans of Febreze. Okay, it's not one paper towel, it's 10 paper towels we put it through, and another company puts it through 20 paper towels, and okay, whatever. All these tap water based products are chemical cocktails that is not in dispute. The chemical analysis of any tap water in the nation is a chemical cocktail, and they will show you what's in there. It's obvious. Chemical after chemical after chemical. And the filters help reduce things, but they don't remove anything. They'll never claim to remove anything because of the liability. They reduce it, but they don't remove it. Filters are like Febreze. They don't kill anything. They just make it smell better because the primary ingredient in taste is smell. So if it smells better, it tastes better. But you're still drinking a chemical cocktail compared to a natural spring water like Summit Spring that has nothing in it except trace minerals. Nothing. How can that not be a better choice? Would somebody explain to me how that's not a better choice? A natural product from nature that's so pure it exceeds every regulation known to man. When the regulatory people are willing to say you can sell that to the public straight from the ground, they know. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
They're tasked with everybody's safety, and they know they'll be hell to pay if anybody gets sick. Yeah. Right? So for them to go out, I have the utmost respect for them that they're willing to do what they did using science as a guide and having the intestinal fortitude to go, there's no reason he can't do this. And because he's proven to us with 15 years of testing, or at the time, 5 years of testing, complete 50-state testing, and the way in which we built the bottling plant with the stainless steel, it's a cradle to grave process.
Talk about that a little bit. I know you mentioned a little bit before, but I think like spelling it out for people here, give them a real clear picture.
Grave, so many things. It's alpha to omega. Right? It's beginning to end. We control the entire process from emanation, birth in the ground, out of the ground, to it's bottled in the bottle. Nothing can come in between those two processes. We control everything. There is no opportunity for contamination or any kind of issue like that. Or just about every other product. Think about when foods are grown in the farm field. Then they have to be loaded in boxes, and then they have to be transported to a factory. Then they have to be cut up. And think about how many places, like in a HACCP plan, they call this critical control points, where things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Where bacteria, where things can enter this system and ruin your product or any kind of deleterious effect. None of that happens. We control everything from its emanation through a stainless steel pipe into the bottle. There's virtually zero chance for anything. That's what the state felt very comfortable about. Our water's not being taken and transported from point to point or put in a tanker truck. How's it get in a tanker truck? It's pumped. It goes through a pump. And pumps have oil seals to prevent the oil and the grease from leaking into the water. So if a seal is failing in any way, that grease is getting in the water. You're filling it into a metal tank that has to be sanitized. So there's sanitization residue, and those tanks have to be sanitized by law. They're open to the air. The air is getting to it. They're being towed by a truck spewing diesel fumes to a tank that's open to the air. So the diesel particulate matter is going to enter the tank that goes into the water as well. And water grabs everything. As you know, the universal solvent, it grabs everything it sees. So there's a million different ways for that water to be impacted, but not in our situation. And it gives the state and the regulatory people, and we have centuries of history. These other companies we're talking about are a joke. These are modern creations, marketing creations.
Yeah.
Show me another business with a 230-year history that predates. We almost predate the formation of the United States of America. A few more years, we'd be before the Declaration of Independence. Jeez. I mean, show me other companies like that.
Yeah.
Show me companies that bottle the same way that it's been done all these years. We're the only one that we not only did we resurrect the source, we resurrected the method in which they bottled. I refuse to put in boreholes. I refuse to suck water out of the ground. We take only nature's overflow and nothing more. We don't take a drop from nature. This water would normally run outside, and the second it touches the ground, it's contaminated and requires treatment. If I was to allow that water to hit the ground and then take it, it would require treatment because the surface of the earth has contaminants.
I'm going to passionately and shamelessly plug our companies because they deserve it. People need to know about this water. They need to try this water. They need to become part of the already well-established small customer base that we have and find out what they know and find out why they keep reordering from us. You've had customers for the entire time you've owned the business.
And before. I've had customers that were with the woman before me that have been customers for 40 years. We've had customers that had children had allergies on inhalers that they drink our water, they stop. They don't need them anymore. We will change your life. We will improve your life. Guaranteed. Just try it for a week or so and try to go back to something else.
So please go to the website, tourmalinespring.com. We sell water on there. You want to order pallets of water. We have lots of families and people around the country who will order by the pallet. So that way, like 3 or 4 families will chip in together. They'll pay for the pallet. Then you can get water for a lot cheaper. Email us. Go to the website, email us, contact us. Let us get this water to you. It is the best investment in your health and in your wellness that you can ever make. And again, I just want to say, at a time when people are so disconnected from nature, there is not a better product you can buy anywhere on the market that will help you get in touch with your own inner nature, because you are literally taking the naturally purest essence of our planet that is being offered, as far as we know, anywhere on the planet, and putting it into your body. Okay, this is such a profound and direct way to connect with nature and your own inner nature. And again, the marketing is to tell the truth of what the actual product is. So again, go to the website, go to our Instagram pages, check everything out, look at it, research it, read the blog articles. Bryan and I are going to be putting out all kinds of information. I'm doing another podcast.
Send questions. We'll answer them.
Yes, like get involved, but try it. Buy it and try it. That's all we can say. Buy it and try it, and you will know why. You'll know why we have so many repeat customers who are so grateful to know that we exist. So, thank you everybody for allowing us to share this information with you, and there's going to be lots more to come.